I'm going to open this with something real. Most men aren't actually afraid of closeness, they're afraid of being shut down. It's that split second where they lean in, take a chance, and the energy drops. She pulls away, her tone changes, and suddenly everything feels off. That's the moment men try to avoid. But here's a perspective most people never hear. There is a way to move toward intimacy without sounding needy, without creating pressure, and without triggering that uncomfortable rejection. It's not about manipulation or forcing anything. It comes down to understanding how emotional decisions are made, how a woman reaches the point where she wants to move closer, and more importantly, who she wants to share that moment with. That's what we're unpacking here. Let me pull you in with something that shifts the whole frame. Women don't reject intimacy itself, they reject how it feels in the moment. If the emotional atmosphere feels off, the answer becomes no. If it feels right, natural, and aligned, things tend to unfold on their own. The key is learning how to create that right feeling without pushing for it. So let's go deeper into the foundation, how these decisions actually happen. Most rejections come from a few common missteps. A man might be too direct too early. He might move faster than the connection allows. Sometimes it's the nervous energy that gives everything away. Other times, it's skipping over the emotional buildup entirely and expecting things to just happen. But here's the truth most overlook. These decisions aren't made logically. They're emotional. When she feels comfortable, understood, and appreciated without any sense of pressure, something shifts. When there's a sense of emotional alignment, that's when openness begins. That's the space where things progress naturally. Now, before getting into specific approaches, there's something important about attraction itself that changes how you see all of this. Men and women often experience it very differently. For many men, attraction is immediate and visual. It happens fast. But for women, it's more layered. It develops over time through shared moments, emotional comfort, subtle tension, and anticipation. That's why a woman might meet someone and feel neutral at first, but weeks later find herself deeply drawn to him. It's not confusion or games, it's the natural way her attraction builds. It needs context. It needs emotional depth. Once you understand that, everything shifts. You stop trying to rush outcomes. You stop forcing moments. Instead, you start focusing on creating the kind of connection where attraction can grow on its own. Now, here's one of the most powerful ideas in all of this. You don't ask directly. Read that again, because it changes everything. You don't go straight for a blunt request. Directness in this context often creates pressure, and pressure leads to resistance, and resistance is what turns into rejection. What works instead is something much more subtle, an emotional invitation. There's a huge difference. A direct ask feels like a decision she has to respond to immediately. An emotional invitation feels like a space she can step into if she wants. When it's done right, she doesn't feel cornered. It doesn't feel like something is being pushed on her. Instead, it feels like something unfolding naturally, like she's choosing it on her own. And when someone feels ownership over a decision, they're far less likely to resist it. Think about it in a completely different context. Imagine someone trying to sell you something aggressively. The moment they apply pressure, what do? You instinctively pull back. Even if you were interested before, that intensity makes you hesitate. The same dynamic applies here. When something feels forced, it creates distance. But when it feels easy, unspoken, and natural, it creates curiosity. And curiosity is what keeps things moving forward. So instead of forcing a moment with a direct question, the focus shifts to building an atmosphere where the moment feels right on its own, where the connection, the comfort, and the emotional tension all line up without needing to be spelled out. And that's where everything changes. What he's really doing in that moment is turning connection into a kind of transaction. He's forcing her to consciously evaluate the situation, yes or no, now or never. And the problem is, the conscious mind is where hesitation lives. It's where doubt starts asking questions. But when you shift into an emotional invitation, you're no longer asking for a decision. You're creating a feeling. And feelings aren't processed the same way as direct questions. They're experienced, not judged. So let's unpack the psychology behind this idea of emotional invitation, because this is where everything starts to click. The goal isn't to push her toward intimacy, it's to give her the space to step into it on her own, emotionally. That's a completely different dynamic. How do you actually make that happen? It's simpler than most people think, but it requires awareness. You shape an environment where she feels comfortable, connected, and intrigued. Those three elements work together in a powerful way. In reality, a woman tends to open up to intimacy when three internal signals are active at the same time: a sense of safety, a sense of trust, and a feeling of anticipation. If even one of those is missing, something in her holds back. But here's the part most people overlook: you don't chase these feelings or ask for them. You create them through how you show up. Let's break those down, because once you truly understand them, it changes how you handle every interaction moving forward. Safety isn't about time, it's about emotional experience. She doesn't need to have known you forever to feel safe. What matters is whether she feels like she can be herself around you without being judged, pressured, or made to regret the moment later. That sense of ease comes from your emotional consistency. When you're calm, steady, and not overly reactive, it naturally lowers her guard. Trust is built through alignment. It's when your actions match what you say. If you express that you're not in a rush and then you actually move at a comfortable pace, that consistency builds credibility. If she sets a boundary and you respect it without making it awkward or turning it into a problem, that strengthens the connection. Trust is what allows someone to relax into vulnerability. Then there's anticipation, and this is where things start to feel alive. Anticipation is that subtle tension, the what could happen next energy. It's not created by pushing forward, it's created by holding back just enough. It lives in suggestion, in pauses, in the space between moments. That's what makes an interaction feel exciting instead of predictable. Here's where it gets interesting. A lot of men focus almost entirely on attraction, trying to be impressive, funny, confident, engaging. And while those things matter, they're only part of the equation. Without safety, trust, and anticipation, attraction alone doesn't naturally evolve into intimacy. Those three elements are what allow it to deepen. Now let's talk about something that feels almost counterintuitive, but works incredibly well: the soft withdrawal effect. Instead of constantly moving closer, you occasionally ease back. Not in a cold or distant way, but in a relaxed, self-assured way that shows you're comfortable with the connection without trying to force anything from it. This shift does two powerful things at once. First, it removes any sense of pressure. Second, it creates space. And that space is what often invites her to lean in. There's something important to understand here. A woman tends to feel more at ease with someone who isn't rushing things, not because he lacks interest, but because he respects the flow of the moment. When she senses that you're not trying to take something from her, it changes how she responds. Instead of reacting defensively, she starts moving toward you naturally. And this is where rejection quietly fades away, because now the momentum feels like it's coming from her as well. Picture this in a real situation. You're sitting close, there's clear chemistry, the conversation is smooth, and everything feels aligned. Most men at this point would try to escalate, move closer, increase physical contact, go for a kiss. But what often happens? She subtly pulls back. Not necessarily because she's uninterested, but because the shift felt a bit forced, a bit too fast. Now imagine a different approach. You're in that exact same moment, but instead of leaning in, you relax back slightly. You pause. Maybe you glance away for a second, letting the moment breathe. You introduce just a small amount of space. What changes? The pressure disappears instantly, and in that absence of pressure, something else begins to build: curiosity. And once that pressure disappears, something interesting happens. She starts tuning into her own feelings. Instead of reacting to you, she becomes aware of herself. A quiet thought slips in. Wait, why did he pull back? Did the moment change for him? And without even noticing it, she begins to lean forward again. She might close the gap, initiate a touch, or re-engage more deeply. That's the soft withdrawal effect in motion. It's not about rejecting her or playing mind games. It's about showing that you're at ease with the flow of the moment. That sense of ease creates safety, and when she feels safe, she feels free to move toward you rather than away from you. Now let's move into something even more subtle. This next idea is what builds anticipation, which is one of the strongest emotional drivers of desire. The third principle is what you could call a shift in thought direction. Instead of asking for intimacy, you gently introduce ideas that guide her toward it on her own. You're not requesting anything, you're shaping how she experiences the moment. This comes through in simple, emotionally aware statements. Things like noticing how natural the interaction feels or how easy it is to connect with her. Expressions that highlight the feeling of the moment rather than trying to move it somewhere specific. None of this creates pressure. None of it demands a response. But each statement quietly plants a seed. Because here's the truth: people respond to what they feel, not to what they're told to do. When she starts feeling something meaningful in your presence, intimacy becomes something she's curious about, not something she feels asked for. And that shift from request to curiosity is everything. Psychologically, what you're doing here is helping her recognize emotions that are already there but haven't been fully formed into words yet. When you reflect the atmosphere back to her, when you put language to the connection, it creates a sense of alignment. She thinks, yes, that's exactly what this feels like. And when two people feel the same thing at the same time without forcing it, that connection naturally deepens. There's also another layer to this, something known in psychology as priming. When certain ideas or words are introduced into a conversation, they subtly influence how the moment is interpreted. Words connected to closeness, ease, connection, or warmth begin to shape her internal experience. This isn't about controlling anything, it's about bringing awareness to what's already unfolding between you. And that awareness is often what turns a simple interaction into something more meaningful. Now, what comes next might be the most important part of all, because this is where many men unknowingly disrupt everything they've built. The fourth principle is about creating an environment where she feels comfortable in her natural emotional state. For most women, intimacy is closely tied to feelings like softness, trust, openness, and emotional warmth. Those feelings can't exist if the energy around her feels tense, rushed, or overly driven. If there's nervousness, pressure, or too much focus on a specific outcome, she instinctively pulls back. Your role here is actually very simple, but it requires awareness. You bring a steady, grounded presence. Not forceful, not overly intense, not seeking validation, just calm and centered. When that kind of energy is present, something shifts. Her guard lowers, and when that guard drops, openness follows naturally. There's no need to push anything forward, it begins to unfold on its own. But let's clarify what this calm presence really means, because it's often misunderstood. It doesn't mean being silent or emotionally distant. It's not about acting cold or detached. It's about being fully present, comfortable in yourself, and not overly focused on what happens next. There's a clear difference between someone who is constantly seeking reassurance, checking reactions, second-guessing every move, and someone who is simply there, engaged in the moment, allowing things to develop naturally.